This comes a day after US President Donald Trump hosted Congolese and Rwandan leaders in Washington to sign new deals aimed at ending years of conflict in a region rich in minerals. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, South African Rugby has extended the contract of Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus, and Sasol has extended their 18-year-long partnership with Wheelchair Basketball South Africa. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. A very good Friday to you, Africa. Here's what we've got in store for you on the agenda as far as business on the continent is concerned. As we do every single Friday, we bring you our weekly business roundup with Victor Khomuswana. Quite a lot that we're looking into today, including the African Development Bank planning to finance $1.78 billion to Namibia. This will be over the next few years. We'll also be looking at the pleas that the Zimbabwe Miners Federation is making to the president regarding the gold royalty hike. Some news also coming out of Safaricom issuing 15 billion shillings bond, a boost really for the turbulent domestic debt market. We'll also take a look at developments coming out of Rwanda and the DRC. And Trump is right in the middle of that. That and a whole lot more coming up for you this afternoon on Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
We begin here this afternoon with the Russian President Vladimir Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They've agreed to broaden as well as diversify their countries' trade relations, moving beyond oil and defense, even as it faces mounting Western pressure to distance itself from its long-standing partnership with Moscow. But how sustainable is this economic partnership in the medium to long term? Channel Africa's economics reporter, Innocent Simosa, has more.
India, the world's top buyer of Russia arms and seaborne oil, has rolled out the red carpet for Putin during his 2-day state visit, his first to New Delhi since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. How does President Putin's visit reshape the economic relationship between India and Russia, especially as both countries push to grow bilateral trade to $100 billion by 2030? Kevin Tutani is a political economic analyst.
India and Russia have not had notable altercations. They've been getting along very well. But this visit just stands to and gives an opportunity for the two nations to solidify the strong relationship they've had altogether. They now have to upgrade it into a more strategic relationship, making sure that it responds to the current geopolitical environment. For example, India wants to be a manufacturing superpower. And if Russia opens its market more to India, India can export more of its manufactures to Russia. Russia as well needs a destination for its oil. India in the past 3 years has been growing its economy at more than 5% per annum.
Tutani shed some economic risks and opportunities for India as it balances deeper trade with Russia while negotiating a tariff-cutting deal with the United States.
India has to be able to stand its ground and argue its case with the Western powers, that is the EU and the USA. India is the largest democracy in the world. In essence, that means if the West loses India, then there are slimmer chances for democracy to prevail within the world. So India is actually a doorway for the West to enable democracy to spread throughout Asia and other parts of the world. And if democracy fails in India, then it can fail anywhere else. So India has to ensure that the West understands that they have to play ball and respect it for being the world's largest democracy. That's number one. Number two, India has to be able to argue its case and also let the Western powers appreciate that they're being duplicitous, they're being deceptive.
Given Western sanctions and India's continued import of Russian oil and defense equipment, I asked Thami, how sustainable is this economic partnership in the medium to long term?
To this day, oil from Russia is reported to be exported to the EU, to be exported even to the USA through dark vessels, surreptitiously. And the EU knows it's happening. The USA knows it's happening. The USA itself is consuming uranium from Russia. As clear as daylight, this is going on. The EU itself is consuming a bit of coal from Russia, uranium from Russia. So if the EU and the USA continue to do trade with Russia, they mustn't expect India to be subservient to them.
As New Delhi navigates global pressure and shifting geopolitical alliances, the durability of its partnership with Moscow will be closely watched, with major implications for regional trade, energy security, and global power dynamics. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
It is exactly 13 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our focus now on some of the leading business stories on the African continent. Yes, granted, we have been bringing them to you since Monday, as we do every single weekday. But you know that when Victor Khomoswana joins us, we get to zoom in and focus on some of the key stories. Victor Khomoswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He's also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. A very good Friday to you and happy December.
It is December.
It is?
What do I know?
It certainly is December. You can tell by all the Christmas trees that have started mushrooming up everywhere.
People are switching on the lights, can you believe?
They certainly are getting ready for Christmas. I guess it's Christmas for Namibia as well, with the African Development Bank planning to, finance $1.78 billion. What is that going to go towards?
Exactly. It's going to go to transport, which is always the key. Transport is like the circulatory system of any economy. Without roads, rail, and ports and harbors and airports, it doesn't matter what you're selling, how good you are, what you're producing. You can't get it out from the market to the customers. You can't move merchandise. You can't move minerals. And by the way, Namibia has plenty of minerals. It's diamond rich. It's a top miner. It's got uranium. It's got a lot of things, a lot of fishing, but also it's got a lot of tourism. So transport investment is where this $1.78 billion it's mainly in loans. I mean, some of it will not be loans, but mostly loans and energy and water. But remember that Namibia is expecting also, with the exploration of companies like Shell, to have their first crude oil production or output in the year 2030. So this is just the African Development Bank of trying to back an economy that, although it doesn't have a huge population, is a major contributor to the resources and other industries of the SADC region.
Right, and let's move on now from Namibia to take a look at developments in Zimbabwe around the gold royalty hike. It looks like the Zimbabwe Miners Federation not too pleased with this.
Exactly. You know, whenever regulators make laws or pass legislation, they focus often on the big businesses. And the Zimbabwe Miners Federation is a federation of small and medium enterprises in the mining sector. So you can call them small-scale miners. In the 2026 national budget, the government of Zimbabwe had decided that they are going to raise the royalty percentage to 10% for anybody who produces over 2,500 or so ounces. No, the minute the price of gold reaches over 2,500 ounce, $2,500 that is, and between $1,201 to $2,500 per ounce, they are going to charge 5%, and then 3% for anything less than 1,200. So they are almost saying, if you are getting a higher price for gold, we want a share of that. People normally call it a windfall tax, because it means if you are getting the markets moving in your favor, then we as the country where you're mining would like to get a share of that. It's often a problem problematic dispensation, Thami, because miners then don't feel like they are going to be rewarded. If you take a risk in mining, put a lot of resources in, most miners feel like they would like a situation like Australia, where it's a flat rate of 2.5%, anything after 2,500 ounces. It's not depending on how much you're making, because it's almost like government doesn't want to take the risk, but when we do get a windfall due to nothing that we have done or that they have done, they want a share of that. Ghana is fixed at 5%. Tanzania and Mozambique, I think, is 4.5%. So the Zimbabwe Miners Federation is pleading with the government of Zimbabwe not to fall into the trap of creating that policy uncertainty.
Now, if we take a look at Safaricom as well, they've issued 15 billion shillings bond, and this is really to help boost the domestic debt market. 15 billion shillings, talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's medium node program. They are trying to get to, Safaricom is in a precarious but also exciting position. Number one, the government of Kenya just announced that they are going to be reducing their stake, I think, to 15%. They used to own 35%, and they are going to sell about 15% or so. I'm not sure about that. But they are offloading a lot of their stake in Safaricom to the South African shareholder, which is Vodacom. And this is just another situation where the government of Kenya finds itself over-indebted, having to offload the stake. But Safaricom, because of the success, the 11% rise in service revenue last year, 2.3 trillion transactions that they are processing through their M-Pesa platform. They believe that they can keep on going to the market and raising some paper, that is bonds of sorts, to ensure that they use other people's money, as they say in the world of finance, that they should be able to inject a lot of excitement and vitality into the capital markets of Kenya. It's a corporate bond that they're hoping to issue to boost their reserves without going to the shareholders, but they're opening, because it's a successful industry, Safaricom's industry, that is fintech, not just necessarily mobile phone telephony, because most of their money is coming from where they are rendering financial services with their phone network.
We wrap up this afternoon with really a deal that's been a long time coming, and with Donald Trump right in the midst of it, between Rwanda and the DRC.
Yeah, I don't always like it when other foreign companies facilitate peace settlements, but with the war in the DRC, Eastern DRC to be exact, and M23, all the accusations against Rwanda and so on, President Trump is actually being called a very level-headed politician by President Paul Kagame, according to reports, who doesn't take sides, he says. But he was looking at this, or hosting this. In June, if you remember, the foreign affairs ministers of the two countries went there and they paved the way for the President Tshisekedi for the DRC and President Kagame for Rwanda to sign the agreement. But for the Americans, it's not about peace in the DRC. It's more about the minerals deals that they are signing on the side or sidelines of this. But of course, if there is no peace, it's going to be difficult for the DRC, for the U.S. to mine the coltan that is there and all the minerals that go into making cell phones, the likes of Apple, which our American companies are dependent on.
Well, Victor Kgomuswana, we thank you so much for today's briefing as to some of the key top business stories on the African continent. One thing that is for certain is, yes, Rwanda and the DRC very much in the area of politics, but we know that politics and trade so very much linked. Have yourself a great weekend, Victor.
You too, Thami. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Victor Kgomuswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He's also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. He takes us to exactly 21 minutes after 4.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Comment est-ce que les militants et sympathisants du parti Les Transformateurs ont-ils réagi face à la condamnation de Succès Masra?
La condamnation de Succès Masra ne nous a pas surpris et les militants transformateurs ont été bouleversés et indignés étant donné que le verdict est un verdict lourd, illégal, injuste et donc face à la répression dans laquelle le peuple tchadien est confronté, les militants transformateurs se sont résignés de ne pouvoir pas sortir manifester. Et donc, c'est une situation totalement absurde pour un pays. Et aujourd'hui, nous célébrons le 11 août, fête de l'indépendance. On pensait que le verdict allait être plus ou moins clément, mais le verdict est sévère.
Annie Kalonji tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 22 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our focus now to world debt and just how African countries are impacted by the interest that accrues on that debt. Now, the World Bank's International Debt Report found that Angola and Mozambique are among the 5 countries around the world with the interest on public debt represents the largest share of gross national income. That's the GNI. The report further shows that in 2023 and 2024, Mozambique had the highest ratio of interest payments to exports, as well as the highest ratio of interest payments to gross national income, while Angola in the same period had the 10th highest ratio of interest to exports and the 4th highest ratio of interest to GNI. For more on this, we joined on the line by Helio Gilish, Policy and Research Advisor. Good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me.
So perhaps let's start with an understanding as to why Mozambique and Angola are currently among the most heavily impacted countries by rising global debt servicing costs.
Well, I think we shall analyze firstly how these economies are based. And if you look into Angola and Mozambique, they both are oil and gas economies and highly dependent on natural resources. So the measure or the larger source of income is based on extractives. So when the price of commodities increase outside or decreases, it impacts directly. And also these economies that are highly dependent on the extractives, when there are some inflection or something in economic terms, it means that government expenditure starts becoming higher, and then the economy collapses into high debts. Or the need to have a debt, to have a loans is higher, then the countries are not able to pay. So then they are paying through the natural resources such as gas and oil in case of Angola specifically.
Right. So when we look at the factors that make Mozambique specifically quite vulnerable, what would you highlight?
Yeah, Mozambique is vulnerable because recently Mozambique has discovered the Rovuma Basin gas and it started to explode. But parallelly, we can see that in case of Cabo Delgado conflict, the terrorism is endanger the situation of exploitation of gas. So huge investments were done by the time, and now constantly government and the Total Energy, they are trying to postpone the starting of the Total Energy Basin exploitation of natural gas. So this impacts naturally, and consequently the country is in a situation that is highly depending on how the revenues from gas will support the economy, will feed the sovereign fund, and so on and so forth. And the conflict is also creating a kind of instability, political instability, social instability, and the country is not responding well to such situations.
And could the country's debt distress be primarily driven, do you think, by external debt? Is it domestic borrowing, or is it a combination of the two?
In case of Mozambique, and I think in Angola too, is a combination of two. And there is also this marriage with the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank. They are the main players in these countries and in many African economies. And they decide what government must do, which policies must be adopted. And if governments are not free, are not autonomous, so then they will keep depending on the IMF and the World Bank, and they are not diversifying the economy. So if we have a strong governance and political will, so then we can shift, we can translate this boom of natural resources into social and economic welfare.
So let's move our focus now from Mozambique to Angola and perhaps deliberate on what extent Angola's heavy reliance on oil revenues has contributed to their debt challenges.
Yeah, we can analyze Angola looking into over the past 20 years. And we could see that Angola is one of the major and the largest oil producers in Africa. And the economy of Angola 10 or 20 years ago were really good. But they are called the dollar and oil economies. So while the price of the commodities and the price of oil at the international market was good, they were selling some good quantities of oil. But while it is established at the international market, Angola started its recession and not responding well. In that time, Angola government, led by Eduardo dos Santos, the past president, started huge investments inside and outside Angola, and also the government expenditure doubled almost. So the capacity to pay these loans, the capacity to deal with this is really weak, and now they are stressed with debt. So it requires both a political will and economic strength in terms of diversifying economy and producing for their own consumption. If still remain, if it's still depending on economic and some external aid, so then the country will keep this position, even being one of the most and largest producers of oil in Africa.
And how have the Chinese loans and the oil-backed debt arrangements shaped Angola's current debt servicing pressures?
With China, I think we are just changing the colonizer. I mean, not colonizer, but the dependency. African countries are now choosing if they keep or if they will remain dealing with Europe, with Western economies. Either they will deal with Russia or they will shift to China. So externally, the policy in China is really strong in the sense that they are investing strong on infrastructure. But there is no free lunches in this world. And when they invest in social infrastructure, then the countries must pay with some concessions, with some goods from the country. So basically, China is doing different, but they are also thinking economically on how do they keep their presence in Africa and keep exploring these resources from Africa. They are slightly different. Yes.
So they're slightly different, but, as you said, pretty much one and the same as far as the African continent is perhaps concerned. I'd like to wrap up with this afternoon, perhaps just your evaluation, Helio, on whether the IMF programs are effective in easing the debt vulnerabilities or not.
Personally, my really personal opinion, the Bretton Woods institutions, they are not willing to make Africa free from dependence. So this aid is always coming with some policies, with some political and economic interference in terms of curricula, in terms of goods, in terms of payments, in terms of salaries. So a lot of conditions are being imposed. So all this money coming from the Bretton Woods, African countries are paying 3 times more. So I think we have to rethink the way that we are cooperating. And we have some good examples in Africa from countries that in very few time, they are free from the IMF and the World Bank. And also we can take the example from Brazil, which has a huge debt with IMF. And in 10 years or 20 years, the IMF start being the debt creator from Brazil. So it requires an internal reflection and looking into our revenues, but then we can keep doing examples such as Brazil, such as Norway and Dubai, Emirates states that are using these own resources, this own wealth on their own behalf, and then diversifying the economy, because this resource one day will end up.
So true and well spoken. So much, Helio. Thank you so much, Helio Gilish, Policy and Research Advisor. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, and see you another opportunity. Bye-bye.
Look forward to it. As Helio Gilish says, there are no free lunches in this world. And on that lunch note, let's head over now to the markets desk where Matapelo Mahapi is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thami, and good afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 rands in South Africa. In Botswana, it's trading at 13.18. In Namibia, it is trading at 17 Namibian dollars. The Zambian kwacha is at 22 kwacha 95 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 48. In Ethiopia, it is trading at 155 birr 22. In Uganda, it is trading at 3,000 shilling 525. In Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 435. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 447. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 47 Egyptian pound 51. In Tunisia, it is trading at 2 dinar 92. In Algeria, it is trading at 129 dinar 25. In Morocco, the dollar is trading at 9 dirham 19. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,207 to the US dollar. A look at your commodities: the gold is trading at $4,222 and platinum at $1,648 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $63.09 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 712 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapala Mahabe.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 33 minutes after 4 p.m. Let's head over now to the sports desk, where Fikile Lingwati is standing by with your latest news from the business of sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. We kick off with rugby news. South African Rugby has extended the contract of Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus for a further 4 years. That means the double World Cup winning coach's contract will only expire in 2031 after the World Cup in the United States. Erasmus' salary as South Africa's director of rugby isn't officially confirmed, but reports in late years of 2025 in the middle of the year suggested around $867,000 annually, with some newer rumors hinting a potential increase towards $1.1 million by 2025, making him one of the world's highest paid rugby coaches, though figures vary. In summary, while figures vary slightly and South African rugby maintains secrecy, Rassie Erasmus earns a substantial salary, generally cited around $881,000 annually, with potential increases recently reported. South African rugby generally keeps coaching contract details private, so these figures are based on the media reports and insider claims. And Titans CEO Jacques Faul has explained the financial implications of not having any Test cricket in South Africa this summer, which affects, among other major venues, their home ground SuperSport Park in Centurion in Pretoria. The stadium, which is usually the stage for the coveted Boxing Day Test, will instead be one of the hosts for the SA20 tournament, with its first match taking place on the 27th of December. Fall says there will be significant losses incurred due to the change in the traditional international calendar.
In terms of revenue, look, you lose on your food and beverages income. So whatever 3 days of a test match would have done, that is what you lose out on if there's no Boxing Day test. So it could be significant for event income, and then of course gate income you lose. And then just a bigger picture is our sponsors will get less exposure on TV, and then for your suite holders, we stadium that our suites sell out, so of course they'll have less international content to view as a suite holder.
Pressed for the exact figures in terms of the money they would be losing out due to this, Faul could only say that the specific opposition determines the profits made. South Africa will host both Australia and England next summer, which is sure to boost the income brackets for major venues all over the country.
It depends on the competition that comes in. If it's India, Pakistan, then of course that's followed quite closely. So it depends on the income. The same with England and Australia. So there's a good year coming up. West Indies just one T20. It'll have an effect, but that's almost normal to the incoming opposition.
And in golf news, a record 7 South African teams will proudly tee up at the Houghton Golf Club from the 10th to the 13th of February 2026 in the Golf South Africa International Amateur Championship. The budget for the participating teams in International Amateur Championship varies significantly depending on the specific tournament and location. Entry fees alone can range from approximately $100 to over $500 for individual stroke play events, while inclusive packages for multi-day international events can cost substantially more. The Africa Amateur Championship is a flagship part of the South African swing. Has a similar 2024 team event was a team fee of $500 to $800 depending on the number of teams entered by a national federation, with most logistics like shuttles provided. Let's end with the Sasol Senior Manager for Group Brand Sponsorship, Nozipho Mlambo, says extending the 18-year-long partnership with Wheelchair Basketball South Africa is key to exposing differently abled athletes to international opportunities. This comes after announcing a 4-year sponsorship deal with the National Basketball Federation. That's where Mlambo says the partnership had to be renewed to help build a transformative legacy for wheelchair basketball in South Africa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
Thank you to Figile Lingwati and Matapelo Mahape. They bring us to exactly 4:38 Central African Time. This is Africa in Business on Channel Africa. There are new concerns about South Africa's financial skills shortage and the country's ability to retain critical talent. These have emerged from a high-level discussion among senior finance and accounting leaders in Mombasa, Kenya. The experts warned that without stronger investment in digital and professional skills, the country risks falling behind global standards. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange reports.
With unemployment stubbornly high and economic growth under strain, calls are growing for the finance profession to help build the skills needed to strengthen South Africa's workforce. Leaders in the sector say developing technical, digital and future-focused competencies will be essential to driving economic resilience. Portia Mkabela, market head of ACCA Southern Africa, says strengthening financial and digital capabilities will be crucial, particularly in a world rapidly shaped by artificial intelligence.
As we are all aware that we have a high unemployment rate in South Africa, and the role that professionals could play would really be to build sustainable finance skills within South Africa, but at the same time we also need to be cognizant of how we manage the public purse in terms of building the skills that the world needs, and also looking at AI skills, which are now becoming very critical within the profession, within the finance profession.
She says one of the biggest opportunities lie in supporting the small business sector, which is vital for job creation.
I cannot emphasize enough the importance of us supporting the SME sector, because that's the sector that brings a number of jobs. However, we also need to look at sustaining those jobs by ensuring that we build skills that will take the country forward, by ensuring that we, develop the finance professionals with the right skills that are needed in the world, not only in South Africa.
Manenje, a member of the ACCA Global Council, warns that South Africa not only struggles to attract skilled finance professionals, it also battles to retain them.
It's one thing to attract the right skills, but it is one other thing as well to retain those skills. And the skills repository that we have, it's where both private sector and public sector needs to get those skills. But I would like to call it shortage not only by the lack of the right people to do the work, but also by the fact that if you have got the right skills, you must know how to use them. If you don't use them, you will lose them. And that is basically what happens.
He says retaining talent requires effective systems, proper incentives, and a stronger focus on using limited resources efficiently.
It is also how we make sure that we appreciate and incentivize talent, retain talent, and invest on talent. But also need to also automate our systems so that they're efficient and effective, and also we cut the frills so that we avoid wastage, because we have got limited resources like any other country out there, irrespective of how much you have. But if you don't use it well, you are definitely not going to achieve your objectives.
Experts agree that South Africa's economic recovery will depend heavily on how well the country develops, protects, and deploys its financial skills base. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Mombasa, Kenya.
It is 42 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time, and as part of South Africa's 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, the Nedbank Group is running a campaign to shine the spotlight on financial abuse against women. The bank says financial abuse is often overlooked as a primary feature in up to 99% of domestic abuse cases. Nedbank says financial abuse can take many forms, such as limiting access to bank accounts and withholding income, to sabotaging employment opportunities. To discuss this further, we joined on the line by Ramotse Palatse, design strategist at Nedbank. A very good afternoon to you. Great to have you with us this Friday afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon to you too and your listeners. I'm really looking forward to discussing this important topic.
A really important topic, and I think one that is not adequately discussed, the issue of financial abuse and how that relates to, other types of abuse against women. But I'm quite interested in finding out from you, what is it that motivated Nedbank to launch a campaign with this angle and focusing specifically against financial abuse on women?
Thank you for the question, Thami. I suppose it's twofold. And I'll begin with saying, Nedbank is a purpose-led organization. We define ourselves as money experts who do good for individuals, families, businesses, and society, right? So if you think about a social challenge like financial abuse, and given our purpose statement, I think we feel we have an obligation to do something, Thami, about it. But even though, I suppose beyond that, if you look at just the impact that financial abuse has and just how widespread it is. You yourself cited the statistic, right, that it occurs in 99% of domestic violence cases. We absolutely had to do something about it. So that's really our motivation.
And oftentimes, when it comes to labeling abuse, financial abuse doesn't quite feature, and that's in comparison to physical abuse or even emotional abuse. So how prevalent really is financial abuse in South Africa from a lived experience?
Oh, great question. I suppose in helping understand how prevalent it is, Thami, maybe it's helpful to define it, because in the definition, I think we'll find some of the answer. So by definition, financial abuse is the control or restraint of a person's ability to get, use, or maintain economic resources to which they're entitled. So put simply, Thami, financial abuse happens when somebody blocks or limits another person's access to money that is rightfully theirs. And that can mean a number of things. It can mean stopping them from earning, taking control of their bank account, or preventing them from using their own money in whichever way they choose. So to your question, I think appreciating the different ways in which financial abuse is defined, you can start to appreciate its prevalence. I think one of the things that we observed, and perhaps we'll talk about this in more detail later, is financial abuse, because it's hidden in plain sight, and by that I mean it's embedded, Thami, in these social and cultural norms. Mm-hmm. It shows up across the socioeconomic spectrum. As South Africans, we know there are certain social ills which are more, pronounced in certain spheres of our society. Poverty being an example. Financial abuse is not the case. From the, if I can use the term, from the poorest of the poor to the most affluent, it shows up and gives you a hint as to its prevalence as well.
I must say, Ramotse, as you're speaking and you speak about culture and you speak about societal norms, etc., at what point does a marriage, does a relationship get into financial abuse, especially because it speaks about two individuals. It speaks about a couple that has made a decision and has decided to maybe live their lives in a particular way. But how do you know whether that way is indeed abusive when it comes to finances?
So, I mean, therein lies the challenge. I mean, I think that question highlights the challenge. We ran a survey, and we are continuing to run a survey, Thami, which we call the How Free Are You survey. Essentially, we launched it Freedom Day this year. It's a day when we reflect on our democratic freedoms as South Africans, and we asked a very simple question to say, how free are you? And from the learnings of this survey, Thami, one of the things we observed was that, to the example you gave around marriage, care is often hidden, or rather, control, I should say, is often hidden in care. So, from both the perspective of the perpetrator of the abuse and the person impacted and affected by the abuse, one of the consistent challenges we see, and this is, I wouldn't say unique to financial abuse, but certainly characteristic of financial abuse, is that it's often hard to see. Often the abuse starts long before the person who's experiencing it recognizes it, because this person is taking care of me, Time.
Right.
This is how he or she shows me that they care. This is how he or she provides. Only later to realize that, no, you were being systematically robbed of your agency, of your ability to, make your own decisions about your finances.
You've got a huge task ahead of you, Ramotse. And I wonder how it is that you, as Nedbank, and your financial products that you offer, help survivors regain financial independence, and perhaps even before the regaining of that financial independence, for them to realize that they actually are in financial chains.
Oh, absolutely. Look, as I said, Thami, financial abuse is unique in that it's hidden in plain sight. So one of the things we knew we had to do as Nedbank was to invest significantly in driving awareness. So if I take you back to this time last year, during 16 days of activism, we launched what we call our Money Warnings campaign. Very simple thing that we did. If you think about the warning strips that you typically see on controlled products like alcohol and tobacco, that talk about the health effects of these products, we put a warning strip on all of our inventory with a very simple message that money can be used to abuse women. And we called out women not because they are the exclusive victims of abuse, but they are disproportionately impacted and affected by financial abuse. I spoke about how on Freedom Day this year, we then launched a nationwide survey with that simple question of how free are you, to encourage South Africans to reflect on the patterns in their own relationships and question, how free am I? Do I get to exercise financial freedom in my own intimate relationship? And once again, during the current 16 days we find ourselves in now, we are once again running the Money Warnings campaign across all of our physical, or a number of our physical and digital touchpoints. But this time, the message is louder. So we have ordinary South Africans who are joining the call to talk about financial abuse and drive awareness on various platforms, Time, including, for example, social media. Important to say, we haven't stopped there, but it seems like you wanted to.
No, not at all. Please don't stop there.
Okay. All right. No, we haven't stopped there, indeed. And we know that, Thami, to truly do our part, we have to move from awareness to action. We have a long-standing partnership, for example, with local organizations like People Opposed to Women Abuse, Power, and a growing community of global organizations, to give people who are impacted and affected by financial abuse access to the resources that they need, to regain their financial agency, as well as help us as a bank better understand how to build safer financial products that mitigate the likelihood of abusers manipulating them to perpetrate financial abuse as well. So lots of work to be done, but we're up to the challenge.
Oh, well, and I wish you all the best. I mean, you're doing some big work there, some life-changing, destiny-shaping work, and very liberating as well for those who, choose to take part. But I can imagine it being a very sensitive process, because as you go through it, once again, as you ask yourself that question, how free are you? When you realize that you're actually not free and you thought you were, that in itself can completely destabilize your whole world and your worldview. But we thank you very much, Ramotse Phalatse, for this really insightful conversation.
Appreciate the time and the opportunity, Thami. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. He's Ramotse Phalatse, Design Strategy Executive at Nedbank.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 9 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time. In 9 minutes' time exactly, Voix d'Afrique will be taking over as we usher in the French desk. We say bonjour to you and a good Friday afternoon.
Good Friday to Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa sur Voix d'Afrique. Dans quelques minutes, il sera question des réactions contrastées après la signature jeudi à Washington par Félix Tshisekedi et Paul Kagame d'un accord de paix. Nous parlerons aussi du Burkina Faso qui annonce l'adoption au Conseil des ministres d'un projet de loi qui rétablit la peine de mort. Et en sport, avec Jolino Sungu, dans la deuxième partie de Vue d'Afrique, il sera question de football, on parlera aussi mercato, on parlera d'athlétisme, on parlera de mondial féminin, de handball et pourquoi pas de championnat de karaté. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup, madame. That's you all coming up with Vue d'Afrique at 5 o'clock.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
We turn our focus now to South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, responding to parliamentary questions, says the removal of medical aid tax credits is provided for in the National Health Insurance Act. That's the NHI Act. Motsoaledi also emphasized that the Act does not compel medical aid members to abandon their schemes and that individuals could legally remain on private medical aid even if the tax credits are withdrawn. This comes after the Health Department revealed that it was in talks with the National Treasury to start removing the medical aid rebate and funnel the quote-unquote savings towards the National Health Initiative, or National Health Insurance, rather. To discuss this further, we joined on the line by Tonishan Naidu. He's the CEO of the Health Funders Association. A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your show. Good evening to everyone.
So you, as the National Funders Association, are opposed to the removal of the medical scheme tax credits. Why so?
Thanks. Firstly, we're the Health Funders Association. But just to give you an idea, we represent roughly 4.1 million medical scheme members. So one of the issues we have, right, is there's no proper numbers done. But medical scheme tax credits contribute roughly about 33 billion rand, right? So the issue isn't about removal of what's been said for the high income earners above 1 million rand. The issue we have is that 86% of medical scheme members, are middle to low income earners. They earn less than 40,000 rand a month, and particularly the low end, there's 44% that earns less than 16,000. Now, when you start removing medical tax credits, particularly, for the lower end income, we're looking at potentially that's one pay slip or one paycheck a year that you're actually removing. Now, that means those members, and there's approximately 800,000 members, would then have to forego the medical aid scheme and then have to rely on the public healthcare sector. So it is a massive impact for almost 800,000 medical scheme members. So that's why we're opposing the removal of medical tax credits.
You've also indicated that any changes to tax policy must come via a money bill introduced by National Treasury and not, as you say, the NHI legislation. What implications does this procedural detail have for the debate and also for the legitimacy of these proposed changes?
Sure. So firstly, I must qualify, I'm not an expert on money bill side, but I can tell you from my rough understanding, the money bill is basically only the Minister of Finance, is able to introduce that. And that is a means of how do you appropriate money, how do you make changes to it. So things that affect taxes, and including, let's say, Medical Schemes Act regard to tax credits, he's the only person with Treasury able to change it. So the Minister of Health has no power over, the Minister of Finance or the Treasury as such. they can make recommendations. But fundamentally, and fortunately, I think that we've seen some sanity prevail, because Minister of Finance says we simply cannot remove medical tax credits when there's absolutely nothing to provide healthcare for, because he realizes removing it will impact the low income earners. So there is no intention to remove medical tax credits, but to fund the NHI, is three ways. And this is as per the National Health Insurance Act, is through taxes, personal income taxes, through a payroll charge, and through removal subsidies and the medical tax. Now, those are recommendations from the Health Insurance Act, but the decision of when and how is left to the Minister of Finance, which he has a whole process to take through cabinet and get approval. So we are probably many, many years away from it, if not decades away from it.
So if the government does proceed with phasing out the medical aid tax credit, what actions does your association plan to take in order to mitigate the negative consequences for your members?
So firstly, I think number one, right, as the Health Fund Association, we are one of the 8 organizations that are litigating and have taken the NHI Act to court, because we believe, firstly, it's unfeasible, right? It's simply in the way it is. Members, all 7.4 million taxpayers in South Africa will have to pay double what they're paying in tax currently. And that's simply unaffordable. So, and then secondly, it's actually regressive. People will be worse off. So we're challenging this in court. However, as Health Fund Association, we've actually put forward a more workable alternative solution for primary healthcare for all 63 million South Africans. And we believe that model can work. What we do need and what we encourage is, let us sit down around the table. Let us build a healthcare system, that works for all our people. The private healthcare sector, is probably in the top 5 in the world. And we've built that, we're ready to roll up our sleeves, get our hands dirty, and be able to transfer those knowledge, experience, skills into building a much better healthcare system for all 63 million people.
Tanishan Naidu, thank you so much for your insight regarding the latest developments around the NHI, as well as the proposals for removing medical aid tax credits provided by the NHI Act. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Tanishan Naidu, who's the CEO of the Health Funders Association, HFA. He takes us to exactly 1 minute to 5 p.m. And that's how we round up this Friday edition of Africa in Business. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and our entire team, technical producer Catherine Maleka, social media Sfiso Hlope, and talent Butelezi, and on the stream and Ntlanhla Nyuswa, on the news Jwalane Tulongwepe, and on sport Figile Lingwati, as well as on the economics desk Matapelo Mahapi. You have yourself a splendid day further and an even better weekend ahead. Over now to the French desk with Vue d'Afrique. Restez connectés.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel